you sure you know what you're doing?
Yeah. Come on.
AZ Rocket Studios.
AZ Rocket
Yeah.
Studios. We're never gonna expand out further outside of Arizona. This is the home base.
We will. Yeah, I think we'll do. I think we can replicate this model in every state, and we'll start with Utah next, and then we'll probably go to Las Vegas and Dallas, and so those entities will be Utah Rocket Studios. It'll be Las Vegas Rocket Studios. So whatever market we go into, we'll have that branding.
Yeah.
But the rocket will remain the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like when you leave Arizona, I feel like you're in Utah or Canada quite a bit. I know why you're going to Canada.
Yeah.
What's your ties to Utah?
Lived there for almost 10 years.
You did.
Yeah.
What ages?
14 to 24, almost.
Okay.
Aside from
Yeah,
my
I
mission
didn't
in
know
California.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that you had Arizona ties previous.
I grew up here.
Okay.
Yep. So we moved to Utah when I was a freshman, and then I lived there for 5 years, and then went on a mission, and then lived there for 2 or 3 years after I got married, and then we've been back here for almost 10.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just didn't know if you had any, like, it was professional relationships that took you up there. I didn't think that you attended like university up there. I guess I didn't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Yeah. And 24, why did you come to Arizona then?
My dad's parents had both passed. That's why we were in Utah. And once they passed, it was sort of like, or wait, so that's why we went to Utah. And then, was that your question? Why did we go to Utah?
Yeah, I mean,
For my dad's work. Like, my mom's parents had passed here in Arizona. We moved to Utah to be by my dad's parents, and then they passed a couple years later. So my dad worked for Wells Fargo corporate, so could work at any major city that had a Wells Fargo corporate office.
Yeah.
And Salt Lake was one of them, and that's where he grew up. And so, yeah.
At 24, what made you decide to come back to
My
Arizona?
wife's family.
Okay,
Yeah.
this was
We're starting to have kids, and so our first was due, and then we wanted to come back to be close to them.
Yeah.
And I grew up here, and I loved Arizona, so it wasn't hard to convince me to leave my family and come here. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had you started working on any of your own ventures at that point? Like, what did the professional life, what were you doing to make any sort of money when you guys decided to come to Arizona?
I was a startup guy. I was in startups at that time. So
You're in Utah. You've now found the person you either think you're going to marry or you have married them. You're 24 years old. You're married?
Mm-hmm. Married at 21.
She says married at 21.
Yeah.
All right. You're in the thick of things. Kids are starting to come. She says, I think I would like it if we go to Arizona.
Yeah.
You occur for yourself as a founder, or you're going to go down this entrepreneurial journey. Is there anything that you felt would hinder you or advance that process by moving states?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the first one, didn't have a network in Arizona, right? The last time I lived here was when I was in my youth, so that was number one. But number two was financial. Like, anytime you're going to start a company, it requires capital, and so I had to, and I was pretty risk averse at that time. So I had to get to a place where I was comfortable leaving the cushy 9 to 5. Because even at 24, 25, I was working for big startups in Utah. Domo and HireVue, notably, were the two. One IPO'd, one was acquired for over $500 million. And by 25, I was making $400,000 or $500,000 a year. These companies, and so that those ratchets, those handcuffs get tight, and it's hard to break those. So I knew that if I was going to do something, I had to, it was either a now or never thing when I was like 27. And so I'm glad that I chose to break those things off.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. For you guys that don't know, this is Tyler Hall. I'm excited to spend some time with you in this format.
Yeah.
Because there is a short list of people that not only inspired me to go down this journey of creating this type of content, starting a podcast, this platform, but you pushed me in this direction of, letting me know that the benefits that could come from it, the growth that can come from spending time with other people in this format, and a little bit of a mission of bringing some good content to the world in what seems to be, I won't put words in your mouth, but watered down platforms where there might not be as the content that you would have be out there getting the most likes and the most clicks and the most views. And so I don't know if I've told you that recently, but I'm grateful for you in pushing me to start the A Million Ways to Make $1 Million podcast.
Yeah.
And I've been looking forward to having you as a guest. I think I told you early on that, that you were one of the first people that I wrote down, to have in the setting. And I'm glad we connected. And in a way, thanks for hosting us today. Tyler has a company, AZ Rocket Studios, of where he helps people launch their social media ventures. Is that fair to say? Not necessarily just podcasts, but where they could come and create content with you, of which you can do everything from A to Z.
Yeah.
Produce, host, create, clip, schedule, all those kind of things. But we're in your home base today, and I appreciate you having us, and it's great. I think this is one of many settings that you have, and I'm excited to see some of the other ones.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And when we first started talking about you doing a podcast, we were actually on the first annual ever boys motorcycle trip. There was 4 of us. It was you and Luke and Dawson and I. And that was one of the most epic trips I've ever done in my life. And it was relatively simple, very unplanned, which I think made it what it was. One of the greatest single moments of my life was that sunset in the pouring rain. I'll never forget that. And I'll never forget some of those experiences that we had and some of those conversations we had around the fire those 3 days.
Yeah.
So
I think that my number of what I would classify as out of body experiences that I'll never forget was that experience. We were linked up on a Spotify playlist. And so we're all listening to the same stuff. You created this, instrumental playlist. It's raining and we're rushing to beat sundown to get to a new place to stay. So there is no time to, take off the gloves and grab a phone and try and capture what we were experiencing. Like we just had to be in the moment. It literally felt like I was in a movie. One of the most epic sunsets mixed with, I don't know how to explain it. I think part of it was that I was on noise cancellation too. So it felt like I was in a theater, trapped in my helmet. Like every sort of experience that my body could feel, I felt like I got it there. And that was a top 5 moment in my life. And I feel like, I've had some cool ones, but that's something I don't think I'll ever forget.
Agree.
Yeah. And you put that together, that's a MO of yours that I'm learning, is that, even in my bio for a little bit, I occurred for myself as a connector.
Yeah.
And that's how you occur for me, is that you're constantly looking for opportunities to get people in the same room where you feel like them getting to know each other will serve them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what draws people to you, because you're a bit of a stoic in my eyes. When we're in these social settings that you created or that you're continuing to create, typically you would think that you might play this host role and be the entertainer of the room and the one putting on the show, so to speak. And it doesn't occur for me that that's what takes place. It's almost like you get this joy of sitting back and watching others collaborate and others advance. And then, you provide value when you see an opportunity or a window. But I love that about you. I love that you have this vast network and that when you call, people answer, and then that you like to do some fun stuff like motorcycle rides and trips and business ventures, and we'll talk some more about what you're doing to
Yeah.
get men together and collaborate that way as well.
Yeah.
So-
Thank you for saying that. That's a, those like very carefully curated rooms have become something that I deeply look forward to in my life. And I don't do a lot of these things, but it probably happens 3 or 4 times a year. But when it happens, those are amazing moments. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you saying that.
And I hope people get to experience you the way that I would. And even in that response, I don't do a lot of them, but when I do, they tend to be somewhat memorable. That's an ongoing theme that I hope people can pick up from you. I think that in my experience with you, quality tends to stand out more so than quantity and overbout. Like when I spend time with you, it does feel calculated. It does feel intentional. Efficient is a word that I would use, as well. Like it so that makes sense in your response. So thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Tyler, can I share something with you that I don't know if I have, and if I have, it's a reminder. But the first time I was introduced to you, I got asked to do a 7-day or a 5-day water fast from one of our mutual friends. And he posted it on his social media. Hey, I'm going to do let's call it a week, because I can't remember. It was the first one I ever did. So it was either 5 or 7 days. Posted, would anyone like to join me on this water fast? And I thought, I like these kind of challenges. I like testing my limits, and detox and some of the advantages that he'd posted about were new to me, and I like the sound of it. So I told him I was in, and surprisingly, like, we didn't have a large amount of people that wanted to participate. And I said, hey, who are these other numbers? And his response to me was, Tyler Hall, if I had to pick one of my friends or one person I know that I believe could be a billionaire, he's the first person I would choose. And that was my introduction to you. It was just like, oh, how come I've never heard of this guy? What makes him so great? What ceiling does he have? What did he invent? What product did he invent, or whatever it may be?
Yeah.
And as I asked a little bit further, it was basically just, a response around who you were being and the world that you were in. And he put you in the tech category, I think, at that time. And you were working on, I wouldn't call it maybe your first venture, but one of your first ventures.
Yeah.
And that was it. We were in a group text. We never met, but we'd been in a group text for maybe 2.5 or 3 years at some point. And then, one of our dear friends, Luke, and you connected, and next thing you know, we're on a motorcycle ride, and the rest is history. But that's quite the introduction. For somebody to say, oh, he's just a buddy that we met, or hey, you should get to know him, that's what that person felt they should say when introducing you. And I wouldn't say that this person's loose with their language or anything like that. It was a sincere compliment. And I felt some sincere belief in that, that this person has this ceiling or this ability. And so you can put that in the talent, work ethic, rooms, ability, genre, domain, whatever word you want to use. But I'm excited for people to hear what you were up to at that point and what you've been up to since, that would make somebody feel the need to introduce you in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I got a little bit of background that I didn't know about, because I thought you grew up in Arizona, and Arizona was home base. You moved to Utah. You do pretty much most of high school there. You start your life there, and you're working for startups that are going places. You IPO. And what was your qualification to get into a company like that and start earning what I would call a high income for somebody in their early 20s?
Yeah.
I mean, you start making $250,000 a year in your early 20s, like, you're either pretty heavily commission based and you figured out how to sell, or I don't know where else I'm putting somebody in their early 20s getting compensated at $250,000 plus before they're 25. Like, what were your qualifications to go into? How would you get a job there? Did you go to college?
The qualifications were my LDS mission. It's
Okay.
probably, I think, one of the greatest things that I've ever done in my life, because it taught me how to bring others along, right? And so when I think about sales, I don't think about it probably the way that most of the world thinks about it. And I actually don't even call it sales. I call it bringing others along, right? And so from a young age, probably even before my mission, I was the kid that grew up. I was always very fascinated by money. My dad was in finance. I was taught about money from a young age. I was never given a dime. This was always, he taught us from a young age that we had to earn money. We had to do things. We had to work. We had to create value to earn money. So that manifested early on in my life as the lemonade stand kid every weekend in my neighborhood. So I would Crystal Light, I'd mix the lemonade, I'd have a cooler full of ice, I'd refill the lemonade with ice consistently to keep it cool. We lived in Arizona growing up. And, I'd make, a good day was I'd make $20 and I wouldn't spend a dime of it, right? So by the time I was like 10 or 11 years old, I had saved a couple $100s, which back then was like, for that age, was crazy. And so
back then, just reference.
Yeah, back
How
in
old are
like
you today?
back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I'm 33 today, to give everybody an idea. So that then turned into baseball cards, buying and selling packs of baseball cards, buying and selling packs of Pokemon cards, eventually buying and selling Nixon watches. So when Nixon watches became a thing, I was hustling Nixon watches. I did candy. Like I would go to candy stores and buy candy in bulk and I would sell it at my school. So I learned that there was this arbitrage between buying things for cheap and then selling it. So fast forward to I'm in college. I'm in my undergraduate in Utah. I school full-time, working full-time. And I'm working at Deseret Management Corporation, KSL.com, which is the largest automotive marketplace in Utah. People don't use Craigslist or eBay in Utah, they use KSL. And so I'm back home from my mission. I'm 21. I'm newly engaged, and I'm feeling the pressure of now having to take responsibility for another human. So that pressure, created this animal in me that knew I had to learn how to start making real money, right? So I save up enough money. I buy my first car. It's a 2006 Audi A4. I convinced the guy to sell it for way under his asking price. I bought this for $7,000. It was all the money I had in my bank. I got a loan from my dad for $800 to fix the timing belt and the tires, replace the tires. So I'm into this car, $7,800. I have no intent of selling it. I'm at work the next day. All day, every day at work, I was scrolling classifieds. I realized I got a great deal on this car. I list it that day on our marketplace. 7 days later, exactly, I sell the car for $11,000 and I make $3,000. And $3,000 to me at that time in my life, it took me about a month to produce $3,000 of income at my sales job at KSL at the time. So that was a lot of money. Didn't think a whole lot of it. Went out, bought another car. I'm at work the next day. This is a Subaru Outback 2002. Paid $4,000 for it. Listed it, sold it for $6,000. So I netted about $2,000. I had some detail expenses and things, but I netted about $2,000. And now I'm onto something. Now I realize, like, wait a minute, there's something here. Maybe I can keep doing this. To make a very long story short, over the next 18 months, I ended up buying and selling around 200 cars. Okay, so I was buying and selling, if you do the math, 2 to 4 cars a week consistently for 18 months.
Team wise, like this is you on your own. Is your new wife helping you with some of the, particulars of shuffling cars around? Like what does the size of your team look like?
So I figured out that I was fairly technical growing up. I was really into computer programming in junior high and high school. which is a surprise to a lot of people, but like I think deep down I'm an introverted nerd, and I've sort of over time just become more sociable. But I learned that KSL at the time, right, like APIs were sort of a new concept. Cloud technology was a new concept. Found a guy that was much smarter than me, and his master's of information systems was a computer programmer at BYU. Told him that I think there's a way we could build a program that would essentially text message our phone anytime a vehicle matched the criteria that we were looking for. And so we'd literally run a machine at home, a computer at home, that all day, every day was scanning these new ads that were coming in. And if it matched our criteria, it would send a link and a phone number and the type of car to my phone. So I got to a place where I'd be in class, or I'd sit in the middle of Salt Lake City where I knew I was sort of central. And every few minutes I'd get a text on my phone, and I'd call every single person. And I'd say, I've got cash. I'm a motivated buyer. Can we meet off of Fifth South? Here's the Circle K. Like, I had my whole process down. And I had a whole process on, once I got the car, it went into a certain shop, Jay's Tire Pros in Bountiful, Utah. Shout out, Jay. It would go to a certain detailer. So that detailer, Firehouse Detail in Bountiful, Utah. And it would go through these processes. My mom would take the photos. So my mom was a photographer, really good at taking photos. She would just do it because she loved me. You know, I didn't pay her anything to do this. She would just take the photos. And then I would go list the vehicle during work hours. So I'm already at work doing my thing.
Can I pause you right there?
Yeah.
I'll remember where you're at in the story,
Yeah.
but you mentioned I'm a cash buyer.
Yeah.
How are you a cash buyer? Did you work your way up to some of those frugal habits of the lemonade stands, of not spending the money once you were making it on the profit?
Yeah.
Did you go get any sort of structured lending to help you to be able to buy cars in bulk? How did you become that cash buyer?
My expenses were very low. So to give you an idea, that one deal I did, I made $3,000. So now I had $11,000 to play with. Paid my dad back, so I had around $10,000 to play with. That $10,000, I went and bought 2 cars. So I bought a $4,000 car and a $5,500 car. I remember almost every deal vividly. This is something about my brain. I don't know why I store this data in there, but I bought 2 cars, and each of them I made about $2,000 on. Okay, so now I've got about $14,000, and that just grew and grew and grew to a place where eventually I had over $100,000 of cash.
Okay.
Set
aside specifically for having an advantage of being a cash buyer, closing on deals quickly,
exactly,
and then putting it in that conveyor belt of Jay's Tires, detailed, mom takes the photos, and now you're off and running.
Yeah.
Okay.
At some point, by the way, I become the lender, so we'll talk about that. So I'm doing all these deals. About 20 deals in, I walk into the DMV to do another deal, and this nice old lady, and I wish I could remember her name. She's like, "Hey, Tyler, good to see you again." Right? Like, I'm a regular now. Like, I'm going in there multiple times a week. She says, "Do you have a dealer license you want to put on file with us?" Like, what do you mean? Dealer what? It's like, "Are you a broker or a wholesaler? Do you have a license to do this?" And I'm like a deer in the headlights. I'm like, no. What do you mean? Why? She says, "Well, in the state of Utah, you can only legally register 3 cars in a calendar year. And according to my records, you've done like 20. So my system flagged, and, why aren't you licensed?" And I said, "I had no idea, so sorry, hand slap. Do I need to pay a fine?" Right? I'm balling. I have money now. I'll just pay this lady off.
Yeah.
She goes, "No, this is a lot more serious than you think. This is a Class B misdemeanor, and you're of age now. You'll go to jail for this." I'm like, whoa. So I literally start crying. Like, I'm a kid. I'm 21. I literally start crying. The lady's like, "Calm down. Like, you're causing a scene. Calm down. It's okay. I'm not going to put you in jail. Your account's been flagged. If you want to keep buying and selling cars, you have to be a registered, licensed dealer or broker." So she gives me this packet. "Here's how you apply to become a dealer." I take that home. I realize, what am I doing? I'm a young college kid. I'm not a car dealer. Dealers are gross, the whole deal. A few days go by. I lose the excitement of doing that deal, of the next deal, making this money. So I go start knocking on dealerships' doors, trying to convince them to let me use their license to keep flipping cars. I knock on probably 6 or 7 dealer doors. All of them basically either owner's not here or it's a hard no. I don't know. Like, I don't know. You're some young kid. I don't want to put our reputation on the line. Convince one to let me do it. This guy named Dave. He has a dealership that used to be there called Velocity Auto Sales. Velocity is now a different dealership. And knock on his door, and he says, sure, pay me $100 a deal, and I'll let you do it. And he's thinking I'm going to do 1 or 2 deals a month kind of thing, kind of passive. Well, in the first month, I had bought and sold like 15 or 16 cars under his license.
Yeah.
And he's like, a month in, he calls me and he goes, dude, how are you doing this? How are you buying so many of these cars so fast? I said, well, me and my, software developer friend, we wrote a program that essentially automated the sourcing of these vehicles. And so I get access to all the best deals faster than you and everybody else. And he's like, can I see it? Right. So on my thumb drive, come in, plug it into his computer. I'm like showing him this program we built.
You're compensating him at this point for allowing you to use his
$100
license.
a deal.
Like, okay,
$100 a deal. So I paid him $1,500 that month, and he was thrilled. Right.
why can I just in that portion of it? Why would he allow you to use his license if he thinks that you're going to do? Let's call it 5 deals. Is okay. $500.
Yeah,
is worth it for him.
Yeah,
like that was the pitch to him,
yeah.
Or it was a little bit of charity. It was who you were being with him. Like, why does he say yes to you?
I don't know. Probably both. Probably like, I'm going to give this kid a chance. He's hustling. He's out here sweating. It's the summer. He's like trying to figure his life out.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to give him some grace here.
And at $100 a deal, did you feel like you won that negotiation when he said yes to it, or was that
totally,
stretching you a little bit and you were okay?
No, the average deal, like I wasn't. I had some deals that I made a bunch on, but the average deal for me was to net $1,000.
Okay.
And so I was paying him $100, and I couldn't do it otherwise legally, right? Yeah. So I had to have somebody.
10% of a consultant fee almost, or something like that goes there. Okay.
Yeah. I show him this software. He goes, would you care if I use this? And he said, I'll waive your fees moving forward if you'll let me use this. I'm like, sure, no problem. So we install it onto his, again, not cloud-based. This is all install-based. It's on that machine. If stuff breaks, you got to go back. You got to plug in the same thumb drive. You've got to update the software on the machine. It's a really complicated process when you have customers, right? Calls me a couple days later, says, dude, I love this program. I have a friend that's not competitive to me that wants to use it. Would you license him this software, right? So here I am, like, thinking the model was buying and selling cars, realizing, wait a minute, the models may be in the software, right? So the next 30 days, I signed up 20 dealers. I basically went and knocked on every dealership in Salt Lake, and I'm selling them this software.
You incorporated at this point? Do you have a website, business cards? Tell me,
barely.
Tell me what validates you as you're walking into this, other than maybe 1 or 2 reference points.
That's about it. It was when I showed them how many vehicles I was buying and selling, private party, like, most people were shocked. Like, if one kid by himself can buy 20 deals a month, then me and my small staff, right? These are small independent dealerships. We should be able to buy 20 cars a month.
Yeah.
And I'm showing them how much money I'm making on these deals and why it's a competitive advantage. And so I just got good at that pitch. And I don't even think I had I didn't have a logo. I didn't have a t-shirt, a hat. I had nothing. Like, I'm walking in there in street clothes.
LLC? Are you still just doing this as personal income from?
No LLC.
Okay.
Nope.
There's a theme in that sometimes I want people to hear that I found with being lucky enough to have some of the guests is that sometimes you just go, go and move, and I don't want to go knock on any other dealers' doors until we have our website up, or whatever it may be, and that loses 2 months of momentum while you figure out how to go and create your first website or whatever it may be, because it's not a priority to you at the time. So I'm sorry, I just get curious around some of those particulars as you're getting going. You're now getting people to say yes. You're now selling a product, or you're selling a product.
Yeah.
What's your structure? What are you offering them?
$1,000 licensing fee per year. If they paid it yearly, it was $1,000. If they paid it monthly, it was $100 a month. That was my deal. And could I have charged more? Probably, but like I didn't know better. I didn't know anything about business or starting a business, or I wasn't incorporated. I mean, I was doing this all as personal income. And there was one point where I walked into my parents' kitchen and I literally had a duffel bag of cash, and it was like $80,000. And I remember laying it out like on their island, $100 bill at a time, to see if it would fit, like cover the whole island, because I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
And I remember my mom walking into the kitchen and she started to cry. And I'm like, Mom, what's up? And she was convinced I was like doing something illegal. She was convinced I was like selling drugs. She's like, I've never seen this much cash, let alone in my 21-year-old son's duffel bag in my life. Like, what is this? And so her and my dad like sat me down and had a chat with me like, hey, you okay? What's going on? Like, how can we help you? I'm like, check it out. Like, I built this software thing and I'm like doing deals and
keep taking pictures.
Mom's
for
taking
free,
me
Mom.
these
This is
photos,
great.
right? Like, and so, yeah, I mean, it was that was a crazy time in my life, but I think the whole point there is I didn't overthink it. I just got to work. I was creative in thinking through, how do I make this more automated, faster, more efficient? I utilized my own capital. So I was bold enough to take the money that I was making to reinvest it to make more money. And yeah, I just took action. And I think that's anytime you're trying to start your first business, I think it's act now and ask for forgiveness later. Don't feel like you have to do everything by the book. Don't feel like you have to have, I think people way over index on a business plan and a strategy and even a name and a logo and a website and an LLC and a thing. And it's like, most of that just doesn't matter that much when you're getting started.
Yeah.
Just get to work.
So you had the obstacle of you're doing this not the way that you should be doing it. You can pack up shop and go find something else. It was good while it lasted. You chose to find a solution and overcome it. Any deals that just didn't go how you thought, that ate into a good portion of your nest egg or your profits that you'd had, that were deterrents? I just, in my experience of having conversations with people as they're getting a new venture off the ground, it doesn't seem to be the most smooth sailing, hence maybe the theme or the name of your podcast, the roller coaster podcast, of going through the roller coasters of entrepreneurship and whatever it may be. Do you have any moments that, being young, I get it, you got the duffel bag of cash, but you have any like kick you in the teeth moments, or did it just seem to go pretty well to get you off the ground?
I only lost money on one deal ever. It was a 1998 Ford Mustang white that the odometer had been rolled back. And so I thought there was 98,000 miles. There was actually 198,000 miles. Once I found that out, because it was in service, they had to essentially roll it forward, or now it showed up on the Carfax as an odometer rollback. It's the only deal I ever lost money on. I lost $800 on that deal.
That was just inexperience. Didn't realize that was even a possibility. Didn't vet that kind of stuff before you purchased. Okay.
However, there was a point where I had fabricated this story that worked really well for my first few deals, and I ran with it. Okay. And that story was this. That story was, I'm 21, I'm newly engaged, I'm getting married, I'm starting a family, I'm LDS, I'm a returned missionary, I'm in college, I'm broke, please help me, give me a deal. That was basically the story, okay?
Okay, for some context, to utilize the fact that you had served a 2-year LDS mission, you felt to include that to your advantage because of the high population of LDS people.
Yeah.
If anyone had done that themselves, there's now this
Trust factor,
a little bit of respect,
likability. Yeah.
a little bit. Okay, so that's. I just want to give people a little bit of context, like similar to someone putting "I'm an Eagle Scout" on their resume. Just you're
Right.
showing that you've done something disciplined, but in that culture, it's helping you in the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had this whole story fabricated, and I had it down. I mean, I could have like hand tied behind my back, eyes closed. I could have recited this story to a T, right? And I remember it's a cool story. I know we're spending a lot of time on this, so we'll sort of wrap this section. We can move into the next venture, the big venture. But this is a fun story. So one of my best friends at the time, him and his fiance, we planned a double date. When we planned the double date, it was a Wednesday. We were going out on a Friday. I had a Jeep Grand Cherokee, a 1996 gold Jeep Grand Cherokee that had four-wheel drive. We were going to take this up into the mountains to this beautiful outlook, and we were going to do a fire on top of this mountain. Okay. The problem was I sold that car on a Thursday. So we no longer had a four-wheel drive vehicle to take up into the mountains. My buddy's like, oh, dude, what are we going to do? I'm so bummed. Like, we got to figure it out. And I go, I'll just go buy another four-wheel drive car, like right now. And so I go on KSL. I find a 1994 Jeep Wrangler. It was green, two-door, with like these cool tires. The guy was asking $5,000. I show up there. I butter him up. I do my whole thing. I give him my pitch. I'm poor. And by the way, at this time I wasn't poor. In fact, I was like rich in comparison to my classmates and people of my age, right? I had made a bunch of money at this point. I'm poor. I need help. I'm a college kid. I'm a return missionary. I'm a this, I'm a that. I've got a family coming. Please help me out. The guy ends up selling me the car for $3,000. We utilize that car on Friday for a date. Friday night, I detail it literally after the date. Saturday morning, I take pictures. It gets listed. Well, the guy sees the listing. Okay. And I listed it for $4,500. I bought it for $3,000. And he sees the listing and he sends me a message and he goes something to the effect of, you've got to be kidding me. And I knew who it was because I had this text thread and I knew what he meant. And he said, I just saw the ad that you posted. And he's like, that's not right. You told me you were a faithful, good young man that was broke, and he's like, you took advantage of me and you bought this thing and I gave you a great deal, a great price because I felt for you. I'd been in your position before. He said, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should ask forgiveness from God. I'm going to talk to your bishop. He's like, I know where you live. Like, I'm going to talk to your bishop about this. Like, it was a whole thing, right? And I just remember, dude, after that, just feeling like, oh, man, like, he's right. He wasn't wrong. Like, I took advantage of this guy. And so I think this was a great lesson for me, which was the 10 or 12 deals I had done before that, probably I didn't do in the best way. Like, I had the right intentions going in, but then I just played on that story for too long. And I took advantage of some people. And that was a great lesson for me at that time, because I remember always thinking, I think he said something like, something to the effect of, I hope that you'll use this as a learning experience to always do business above board moving forward, kind of thing. And this stuck with me. I can still see the guy's face. And this was 15 years ago, nearly, right? And so, yeah, that was, I changed the way I did business then. That got really big. I ended up starting to lend money out to dealerships to buy inventory. This was at 22, and then the startup journey happens. So
it's my understanding that you pivoted from what could have been you going and opening up your own dealership and then doing some form of licensing this software that you'd created, upping your pricing now and scaling. but you go and work for somebody. So you
Yeah.
transition from this, what I'll call entrepreneur, hustler, sales,
Yeah.
and now I'm going to go work for somebody. Tell me where your headspace is in that, and what is that transition like? Because I imagine your schedule was whatever you wanted it to be. I mean, you could look at KSL at 10 p.m. or at 5 a.m. or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. Now I imagine you're asked to go into an office. You have some sort of report to go to. Like, why the shift?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I had identified through becoming a lender, lending out money to car dealerships, I now had exposure to the way that these dealerships operated. Before that, I didn't know. Like, all I knew was flipping cars, peer to peer. I didn't really know how dealers bought cars, how they reconditioned them, how they sold them, etc. So now I had that understanding, and I saw some opportunities in the automotive space that I could have solved with software. One of them was, how do you provide better insight into what these cars actually cost in order to make the most profit margin? And the second one was, how do you enable car dealerships to buy more private consumer vehicles as a source of supply versus going to the auction, right? So I wanted to solve these two things, but at this point I'm 21 and a half, 22. And I remember going to my brother who was raising money. He was like 26, doing private equity already, just killer. Him and I, like, very similar. My middle brother, very different. And he was friends with this guy named Josh James. And Josh James had founded a software business. I said, hey, I want to build some software. He goes, you should go work for Josh. Josh had built a company called Omniture that was acquired by Adobe for 1.8 billion, like 2 or 3 years before. It was the largest acquisition in Utah history. He told me this story. I said, cool, I'd love to meet Josh. So he text enters me to Josh. I go meet with Josh. He's starting a new company called Domo. They're like 27 people when I meet with Josh in this tiny little office. And like, if you know the company today, it's a hilarious like visual to think about. Go meet with Josh. He's like, tell me about yourself. Tell him my story. Tell him about flipping cars. He's like, you're going to be really good. Like, do you want to start today? Basically. I'm like, yeah, cool. Like, what am I going to do? He's like, doesn't really matter, but like, you'll be an account development manager. It's like the lowest level sales position to kind of get your feet wet, right? So I go to Domo, and really, again, he doesn't know this. Nobody knows this, but I'm going to do this to learn from somebody how to, like, I just want to be in the walls of how these businesses work. So one day I can start my own. So I spend the next 3.5 years at Domo. We go from 30 people to 900 people while I'm there. We raised $900 million of venture capital. It was the highest funded SaaS company in history at the time. And so you see a lot, I mean, it's fun, but you see a lot of like what to do, what not to do in that environment. I joined almost every product meeting. So I learned how to like build software really well. I get recruited by another company. At this point, I'm 25. Domo, the most money I ever made, by the way. I went from year one, I made 70,000. Year two, I made 95,000. Year three, I made 140,000. So that was the most I made at Domo.
Yeah.
But I'm 24 when I leave. Okay.
So peer relations to that. I mean, you're feeling as confident as can be. You can go produce higher than average income independently.
Yeah.
And when you go get in a workforce environment, you can scale based on your performance. Like there has to be some sort of confidence in your ability to create income at this point.
Yeah. And through that confidence, James, that's when I did my 2-year at LDS Business College, which was the Mormon Church's college. And then I get accepted. I have a letter of recommendation written to the dean of Stanford University. I get accepted to Stanford. I go to start going to school at Stanford online. It was one of the first ever fully online bachelor's degrees that you could do through a program called NovoEd. I do 2 semesters at Stanford and realize all of this schooling is a complete waste of time and energy. And I drop out of Stanford. And by the way, for my wife's family and my family, who are all educated people, this was a big deal. But again, I've got a couple $100,000 of cash. I've realized, like, I know how to bring people along. I know how to sell. So, and really what I want to do is start a company. Do I need the piece of paper to start a company? The answer was no. So I dropped out. And
How long into the journey?
At this point, I'm technically a junior in college, but I'm still not even 22. I think this was right before I turned 22. I'm at Domo for maybe 6 months. I start killing it, and I drop out.
Yeah.
And when I shared that news initially, this was kind of a big deal, right? And 2 weeks after I drop out of college, I'm now barely 22. I remember my wife is 20, combined age 42. We build our first house. And that put everybody at ease, put my parents at ease, it put her parents at ease. They were like, okay, he's doing something right because he just built a home at 22, right? And so, yeah, I go do Domo. I get recruited by a company called HireVue. Domo IPOs, HireVue, we sell for $511 million to the Carlyle Group. And 7 years in, now I'm 27, 6 years in, I realized that I know how to do this. And so I have the confidence, I have a little bit of capital. I had made some money on these exits. So that's when I launched my dealership. And that's where Drivably, which was my big win, was born.
Yeah. So you feel like your strategy would work. I would almost call that your education phase, to go work for these companies to learn how they're doing it. You get to experience IPO, you get to experience being acquired, and your wife approaches you and says, this is all great, but let's have a family. And if we're going to have a family, let's go to Arizona.
Yeah.
Timeline aligns for you to say, all right, if we're going to go to Arizona, this is the rip the Band-Aid off. We're going back to this is what we've been working for moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I convinced my boss at HireVue at the time to let us move to Arizona and work remote. I was good enough that it was sort of like, hey, I'm either going to leave or you're going to let me do this. My last year at HireVue, I was 27. I made $440,000, right? So, and each year it was like sort of incrementally, it was going up by about 10 or 20% for those 6 years.
Because you were performing at a higher level, or because your compensation structure benefited from the growth of the company?
It was certainly both, right? Like I had refined those skills, gotten better and better at selling. And then I had bigger and bigger roles, right? So by 27, I was the head of global renewals at HireVue. It was a $45 million a year business. I had the P&L for it. Like,
yeah,
this was like what most like 40-year-olds would have been really excited to have. And I had it at 25 or 26 at HireVue. So, yeah. So convinced them to move. About 6 months later, I leave HireVue. And I start a company in a market that I know nobody in, basically. So that was tricky.
And what's the grand idea? Drivably is going to do what? It's going to take you back to your roots, to where you can go build upon the software that you had started out. So this had been, I don't want to call it in the closet, but this had been shelved
for sure
for a season to go learn what you could learn from these tech-based companies, to now come back to your roots.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at?
Yeah, we were solving the same problem, which was how do we enable dealerships to buy consumer vehicles as a source of sustainable inventory supply? So we were solving the same problem, but the software at this point, this install base, like DOS, like not really, but very old technology, was super outdated. And so we started completely from scratch. So, I had this dealership, and I was able to go convince investors at the time, 2018, to invest. And I raised about $4 million prior to even launching a product. And that was on the backs of I had done this thing in college. I
Yeah.
knew the market really well. Now I own a dealership and we're like testing this product here. And we just need the capital to go build real technology here and scale this thing.
Take me to like the practicality of, I now own a dealership. So you go and knock on doors, you see a dealership for sale, you go hire a real estate agent to find you a lot that you can do the TIs on the building. Like, take me through a little bit of the practicality of, ribbon cutting. Drivably's now open.
Yeah. Had enough capital to fund a portion of this, needed some outside capital to fund the rest of it.
Okay.
So needed to raise about $500,000 to get this thing stood up. And this was essentially new building. It was a tear down that was available for lease with a dirt lot. We said, we'll come in and basically help with the TIs on the building and the lot. So we got a really good lease term and essentially leased this building, TI'd it, went to Vegas, bought 25 cars at auction, brought them there, and then pretty quickly it was real. I mean, it was within a few weeks, this was a real thing. But I raised about $250,000 to do that.
From
one friend.
One friend.
Yep.
Okay. What was why would he give it to you? What was the pitch to him?
Yeah.
Was there long-term involvement? Was there high interest terms, length? Give me a little bit of idea of making the pitch for somebody to write you a $250,000 check for a startup.
Yeah, he was going to own a big chunk of it. Based on my experience in and around automotive, there was a lot of trust there. Like, you've done this, you know what you're doing. You've been an investor, a debt investor in other dealerships. And in addition, there was like this, hey, either one of two things are going to happen. We're going to scale this car business, or our thesis is going to be correct on the software side. And we're going to scale that. And either way, you're going to be involved and you're going to have a piece of this thing. And he did, right? So when we ultimately sold that dealership 1 year in and we spun out Driveably, my friend who was the original investor still owned a big chunk of that business. So,
yeah. And any sort of involvement other than writing the check?
Not really. I mean, definitely some like coaching around how to run a real business, because he had ran several in the beginning. But once Drivably was spun out, really it was a board meeting with him once a quarter.
Yeah.
Was all.
Your frame mind was, I'm going to seek this individual out because of the experience he could lend? Or was it, if anyone's willing to give it to me, I'll take it?
My frame of mind at that time was, I felt confident that I could go raise the money from a lot of places. This individual was somebody who I wanted, was a role model to me. I wanted to be closer to him. It wasn't even about business as much as it was, he was a great father, a great family man, a man of faith, and I wanted to be more like him.
Yeah.
And so I really hoped that he would come along this journey with me so I could be his partner and be closer to him and spend more time with him.
Yeah.
It's probably a different answer than you're used to, but
no, yeah, I think that there's benefits from intentionality, and when you're just going out with your hands out, asking for money, I would encourage people, at least in my experience, and it sounds like you had a similar, frame of mind, that if you can be intentional about creating partners, the likelihood of it succeeding increases.
Yeah.
And rather than, oh, that person has money, maybe they'll give it to me. Yeah. Or that person has money. It's like, well, yeah, okay. As a backup plan, let's go. But if I had my first pick, who and why and how, and I like that. I like where your head was at, and especially at a young age. And I'll call mid-20s a young age.
Yeah.
I think that would serve you.
Yeah.
You've got the capital. You have an exit a year later. Who and why? Why would you go through getting the dirt lot, getting the cars in from Vegas, doing the TIs on the building? Why would you sell something a year into it?
That business is one of the hardest businesses on families in the world, being in the car business. because it's 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day, no matter what. You've got to get there. There's certain prep you have to do every day before your doors open. And you've got to stay open late enough because certain people car shop after work, 6 to 10 p.m. kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that was incredibly taxing on my relationship with my wife and my kids, because I just was never home. I was out the door at 4. I was going to the gym. I was getting to the office early. Like it was a lot. And, we had so much confidence in the software play that the dealership at some point just felt small. It felt like this thing's just going to be in our way if we keep it here. Let's go all in on this software thing. And that's what we did.
Yeah. Profitable exit or a strategic exit?
No, this was more of a strategic exit. So sort of think about it as got our money out of it.
Yep.
So we're net even.
Yeah.
The new GM that came in that owned it was super happy with the terms. And it was kind of like, if we would have ran a process, we probably could have doubled our money, but we were happy with who he was. The dealership's called Auto Hall. It still exists today. I mean, it's still in downtown Chandler. They do very well.
Yeah.
My name's still on the building, which is weird, but or cool, depending on how you look at it. So
one frame, and we can transition a little bit, but you moved to Arizona. You were still employed.
Yeah.
You start the new venture. Can you speak on that strategy? Like, when did it get to a certain place where it no longer aligned to your employer to be spending time on another venture, or it got to a point where it would serve the business if you took the full leap? Like, can you walk us through a little bit of that and that portion of it? So I think that this is a pivotal part in people's journey if they're going to take a leap. That they're maybe employed or transitioning. You are working remote for a company. You get another company off the ground. Touch on that transition period. Would you have done it differently? Did it slow Drivably's growth by still not burning the boats per se? Or if you did it again, did that serve you the way that you intended and you would encourage others to do something similarly? Can you speak on that?
Yeah. So I think in a nutshell, the question you're asking is, at some point, if you're going to start a company, it probably means that you're leaving a 9 to 5 in most cases. And I think this is one of the conversations I end up having the most with founders, which starts with something like this. It's, Tyler, I think I want to start a company. Do you think I should start a company? And my answer is typically something like this. No, you probably shouldn't, because most shouldn't. Let me tell you why most shouldn't. Do you feel like your relationship with your spouse is great today? Yes. Okay. What about your kids? Yes. Do you spend much time with them? Yes. What about your friends? Good relationships? Yes. Do you spend some time with them? Yes. You have any hobbies? What do you like to do? Well, I like to play basketball. I like to go to the gym. I like to do a thing. Great. You enjoy those? Yeah. Do they fill your cup? These are good. Yeah. Okay. Do you have money right now? Like, do you have some savings in the bank? Yes. How's that feel? Is that good? Yeah. I've spent my whole life saving this money. Okay. Like mentally, emotionally, like, do you feel like you're in a pretty good place? Yes. Do you sleep well at night? Yes. Okay. Cool. If you want to do a startup, you have to consider the following things. There's a high probability the relationship with your wife is going to suck. You're never going to see your kids. You're going to be a horrible dad. You're going to have no money. Like, you're going to burn, basically all savings you have it's going to go to zero, negative bank balances, credit card debt, which creates a lot of mental health and stress and anxiety. You're never going to see your friends. So just tell your friends, if you're going to do a company, like, I'll see you in a few years. And the list goes on sort of for a long time. Okay. Now, If you just heard what came out of my mouth and you had no physiological reaction to it, then maybe you should do it. But if anything I just said caused you any sort of physiological reaction or angst or anything, then you shouldn't do it. And that's my advice. And one of the hardest parts of the whole equation is just making the decision to start. And so many people go, well, I'm going to moonlight. I can keep my 9 to 5 and I'll start moonlighting. It's not going to work. It's never worked in the history of great companies.
Never.
Show me someone that's ever done. I mean, listen, to build a great company, you're literally 80 hours a week minimum if you want to build a exceptional company. You're
But
never
all the entrepreneurs I know that are business owners can do whatever they want, whenever they want, and they create their own schedule. What is this whole, like, if I'm an entrepreneur, like, I don't have a boss, I can create my own schedule. What do you mean I'm not going to see my friends or my family?
after you eat shit for a long time, maybe.
Layman's terms of that quote.
Those friends that are entrepreneurs that seem to have it all together, that have their own schedule, that have money, that are hanging out at the lake, spending time with their friends, fancy dinners, those are the few that literally went through the pain and the agony of several years of their face in the dirt that made it out to the other side. Most do not.
Yeah.
That's the point. And so if that gives you anxiety, knowing that the odds are incredibly stacked against you, the probability of success, specifically in SaaS companies, is like close to zero. Okay. And so it just doesn't make sense. You almost have to have, and I can feel it when I talk to aspiring entrepreneurs who has this and who does, you almost have to have you have to be like a little
sick,
insane. Like you have to have a little screw loose in your head.
Yeah.
To be able to take that jump, right?
I love that you set that expectation. You know, Tyler, the loneliness of that journey seems to be a theme. It's a theme that I've experienced. It's a theme that most experience that might be these extroverts. You know, you said that you were maybe naturally an introvert, and there's some people that can go in this cave for a few years and come out the other side, and it's great. But yeah, you're right. This saying no to parties, saying no to the dinners and the Wednesday afternoon at 1:00 lake trips and the Tuesday morning golf rounds and these things that you at the time have the means to be able to do, or you can go create. I don't know if I would say has to disappear, but certainly to me seem useful to be shelved, to be committed to, the venture that you're starting.
Yeah.
And, my definition of commitment from a mentor of mine is to do whatever's necessary. Not to do whatever it takes, but to do whatever's necessary to grow a business. And then there's the other things. There's Tyler, I'm curious. I've been observing this timeline of this. You called it the eat shit for a period of time, nose in the dirt, this grind, this sacrifice period, that I feel like there's this 7-year, I started my business. The first year was just survive. Like, is this a real thing? Can I get it off the ground? Year 2 is, can I start generating any sort of income from it in any way, shape, or form? Year 3 is like, okay, I think I've got something here.
Dude.
And then you pick your head up and it's like, man, I know a lot of people, and I'm hearing their stories that it almost is like this lucky number. Like at year 7 is like I did it. Now what do I do with it? Do I want to start taking the bigger draws? Do I want to start being a better husband, father? I'm at the birthday parties at 4 p.m. Whatever it may be. But I'm curious if you feel that you've seen a similar timeline, but there's a real sacrifice from I'm live to I'm still alive.
Let me try to put this into words, okay? This idea that most people should not start companies and be entrepreneurs. So I have a podcast called the Roller Coaster Podcast. It was started on this idea that building companies is like a roller coaster. There's these extreme highs and lows, right? Think of it this way. Most people, as they go throughout their life and they go to their 9 to 5 and they do their thing, and I'm not disrespecting these people, the highs and lows of their life on a 1-year time scale look sort of like this, okay? They're a little bit like, I got this win at work, I got a bonus, I just found out a good friend of mine from my childhood is ill. Oh, I've got this thing. Right? The only way to explain it is building a startup, that same time scale looks more like a heart rate monitor, right? So like the highs and lows look like this. Okay, so it's not a smooth roller coaster. It is like in the same 24-hour period, you could be at the pinnacle, at the top of the mountain, and you could be in the depths of hell. And I'll explain a day because I have this well documented. Okay. Here's one day in the life of being an entrepreneur. I wake up in the morning. The first thing I do is I roll over and I grab my phone and I look at my email. In my email inbox, I have an email from an investor that we had pitched earlier that week that said, we're going to write a check into this round. By the way, I was like basically out of money at this point. So this is big news. Okay. One of the biggest news in the company. This was huge, right? Basically, okay, we got to check a couple boxes and we're good to go. 2 hours later, I get to the office. It's about 8 a.m. My assistant at the time, which by the way, shouldn't have had an assistant. We were way too early of a company. I spent way too much money. Made a lot of mistakes there. She walks in my office. She says, hey, we need to talk. Like, cool, come in. She's like, outside. We need to talk outside. Okay, what's going on? She was also the head of HR. Okay. She comes, she tells me, she says, I'm going to use the name Scott in place of the person's real name to protect him. She says, Scott went out last night with, I'll use the name Jessica in place of this person's name. These are 2 married employees in our business, okay? 2 other people. Scott took Jessica out last night and they got drunk. They were in a company car. They proceeded to get in the car drunk and for him to take her back to his house or to a hotel. And on the way to the hotel, they got pulled over. And Scott called me. By the way, this is my best friend at this moment, okay? Very close to this person. He was my first employee at Auto Hall and at Driveably. Scott called me and I have the call recorded of his interaction with the police. Do you want to hear it? Yeah. Yeah, I do. Plays the recording and it's an interaction with the police. They basically took Jessica to her house and they had Scott there and he is now on the phone with my assistant and he is telling her that they had racially profiled him and this is a whole deal. And they're saying, sir, You're drunk. Please step out of the car. Please step out of the car. Please step out of the car. Okay. So it's a 3-minute call. I listen to the whole interaction. Call hangs up. She says, Scott is now in jail, so he's not going to be here today. 3 hours later, Scott walks into the office. And I'm like, what's up, Scott? How you doing? Like, what happened? He's like, I need to talk to you. I'm like, this is great. He's going to come clean. He's going to tell. He says, I had a friend fly into town. It was one of my homies. We went out. We had a drink. I was taking him home. I got pulled over. They racially profiled me. He's a black man. I couldn't believe it. This is what this world's come to. It's ridiculous. By the way, he has no idea I know the truth, that I know everything. Which,
He
by
doesn't
the way,
remember calling the assistant.
he does. He
just
doesn't
doesn't realize
realize that she had told me. And I think he tried to, hey, please don't say anything kind of thing. So I say, okay, Scott, just so I really, they put me in handcuffs. I couldn't believe it. I've never been to jail. It was the worst night of my life. And I'm so sorry, man. Just so I really understand this story. What happened? Just tell me one more time, just everything. My friend, he flew into town as a guy. We had a drink. He tells me the same story. He says, Scott, you trust me, right? I trust you a lot. I love you. One more time, what exactly happened? Take a note. What exactly happened? Please, man, what happened? My friend came into town, gives me the whole story. I said, I'm sorry, man, this is your last day. Go pack your stuff. You're done. Couldn't believe it. Looking at me like, excuse me, did I hear that correct? Yeah, you're done. That's it. And so he packs his stuff and he leaves. Okay, so I wake up, 6 a.m. One of the best news I've gotten in my whole company. 2 hours later, I fire my best friend for having sex with another married person in the company and utilizing a company car and getting a DUI and going to jail.
Roller coaster.
At 1 o'clock, okay, so he's out of there by, I don't know, noon. By 1 o'clock, one of our salespeople closes the biggest deal in company history. The biggest deal was like more than $100K a year. This was huge for us at this point. And then at 4 p.m., I get an email from the same investor that morning that said, hey, false alarm. We can't come into this round. We're happy to have a call and tell you why. Okay, so that is what it's like. That's hard. And that happens all the time. All the time. You can attest to this. People that have built companies know that is not abnormal for that to happen. And at some point, and we can share how we got here, but at some point in this journey of building Drivably, I went from making almost $500,000 a year, very comfortable, could do whatever I wanted with my wife and my new kids, and life was cushy, to having a negative bank balance. I had negative $87 in my bank account at some point during Drivably. That's what it took.
Tyler, the thing that I don't think gets spoken about enough is who you have to be during the roller coaster. Because can you be the highest of high and the lowest of low? And, can you walk in? I saw a social media clip that I wish I knew their name to reference, but it really brought this to my attention. It's like, the ones that can survive are the ones that can stay even killed when they're with their trainer in the morning and they go into the office and have to fire their best friend, and then they get the seed round accepted and then it gets taken away, and then you get the record breaking sale, and then you get served the notice, and then all that happens. I'm going to call it Scottish weather. I spent some time in Scotland, and you leave in the morning with a pea coat and a scarf, and then by lunch you were sleeves rolled up, jackets away, and then by the evening again you're back in gloves and a beanie.
Yeah.
All in one day. I mean, you're getting all 4 seasons in one day.
Yeah.
Can you stay even killed? And that would be my version of advice of, can you handle that amount of weight or that amount of stress? And then, I don't think that it varies much whether you're starting a service-based business or a tech business or anywhere in between. Like, starting a business is starting a business,
Yeah.
and there's going to be things that come with it. And that's what it sounds like we believe you're going to need to get through to get to the other side, which is the reason that you would consider starting the business in the first place.
Yeah.
Is to get to that end goal. Yeah.
That's a great point, James. And there's an analogy that I like to use around this, which, by the way, there's sort of separated into 2 things. One is like learning how to do that, and the other is DNA.
Yeah.
It's like, do you have it in there or do you not, right? I call this flattening the curve of the roller coaster. So how do you take this heart rate monitor, and while this is happening, how do you stay like this, right? Somewhere in the middle. And if I had $1 for every time somebody in my company said, man, you're just kind of like a machine. Like, you don't show a lot of emotion. You don't have a lot of empathy. And candidly, during that time, I didn't. I was just sort of like, I thought of myself as like a robot. It's like, I just need to operate within these parameters here. And when we close the biggest deal, I'm not way up here. And when we get our teeth kicked in the next hour, I'm not way down here. And so the analogy I like to use is this. You guys have done Disney before?
Yeah.
You familiar with Space Mountain?
Yep.
Okay. A lot of people are going to know Space Mountain, right? For those who don't, Space Mountain is completely pitch black. And so you're on this roller coaster and you can't see what's coming. It's dark. And so the first time you ever do Space Mountain, it's hard to prepare for that. And you're getting whipped around, and like, it's just like, whoa, what's happening? You can't see what's coming. And you get to the end and you're like, oh, dude, like, what? Like, my hips and my neck and everything hurts. And you're like, but I kind of want to do it again. There's like this sickness in us. Like, I'm going to do that again. That hurt. And you go in, and the next time you're like, okay, I know that we start with a right, and then it does a left. And then I know that once we get to this place, you do. And so you're kind of bracing, and you get done, and you're like, okay, that wasn't as painful. That was a little better. It was still like intense, but it was like, and then the next time you do it, they flip the lights on, and you can see every turn and every bump and every twist, and when you're going to go fast, when you're going to slow down, and you can brace for every one of those things. That's flattening the curve, right? That is the repetition that is required to get to a place where you know what's coming next, and you can prepare for that in a big way. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Right there.
I love that. Tyler, give us the snapshot of creating this company. You've raised rounds of money.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to give us the overview of it with some intangibles, because that's a request I'm receiving right now.
Okay.
Is that we covered, I believe, what it takes. Right now, what it takes to start the business.
Yep.
Give us the 30,000 foot view of, we're open, we've raised money, we started the business, somebody approaches us to acquire it, and something that you felt that you did was a separator that somebody could go take and apply in their business currently if they're seeking being acquired. Was there a goal in mind? Are you tracking with that,
Mhm.
that thought process? When Drivably was started, was it to sell it? Or did the right offer come? And if the intention was to sell it from day one, did you do it, if you were to do it again, would you do it the same way? Or no, we were just looking to build a business. And then when somebody came in to acquire us, our quality of earnings and our EBITDA was not where we would have had it been if we were planning on selling it previously. Like, give us a little bit of the intangibles of this business. So first of all, define Drivably for those listening right now.
Yeah. So SaaS marketplace, meaning we had a SaaS component to our business, software, and we had a marketplace component to the business. The software piece was a dealership could enter a VIN number and we would tell them precisely how much money that car was worth in their market. So they knew how much to pay to maximize profit. The marketplace
Zillow,
side,
like
what's that?
Zillow,
The Zillow of cars.
appropriate
Yep.
comparison?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can go on Zillow and see the value, the rough value of any home. We built that same thing for auto. Okay. The second piece of it was a marketplace where dealerships could go in and buy vehicles as a source of supply from consumers like you or I that were selling our vehicle. The secret sauce for us was COVID. COVID was the reason it took us 4 years, not 7 or more. Okay. Should have taken a lot longer. The advice I give to founders in this idea of exit strategy is that I think exit strategies are bullshit. I don't believe in them. I believe that you build companies to build great companies that create a lot of value and that can stand on their own 2 feet. And if you do that well for a long time, then the result of that is that great companies and strategic buyers and institutional capital will come through and want to acquire your business. You hear founders say all the time, well, I think this is one of these ones that I could build in like a year or 2 and then sell it. And the answer is no. Like, that's impossible. You have to build great companies because the only companies that are being acquired are great companies at the end of the day. You can't really fabricate that, right?
Are you coming from a place of experience where you know buyers that purchased companies that were built to sell and there was corners cut and they wouldn't do it again? Or like, where does this belief system come from that starting a company to sell it will not serve anyone involved?
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
Investors, advisors to the company that were way smarter than I was.
Okay.
Basically ingraining this idea in my head. Like, let's just go heads down and build a great company.
Okay, so this is where your mindset was.
Yep.
We're not selling it, we're building it. Would it be fair to say you're going to build a legacy company? Like, you're going to go build Drivably to be something that you see yourself doing for the next, let's call it decade at least?
Yes and no. Because I raised venture capital, there is a bit of pressure around raising venture capital.
Okay.
Because they have funds that they raise, and these funds have a shelf life essentially.
Yeah.
And capital gets deployed out of these funds, and they need to provide returns to their investors within a time window.
Typically inside of a decade, in my experience.
Inside of a 10-year window.
Yep.
And that was all of it's most VCs early stage are a 10-year fund. So that puts a little bit of pressure on companies to sell, but the best investors are like, let's not think about the sell. Let's just go build something great. And they knew if we build a great company, buyers will come and we'll have those opportunities.
Would you go the VC route again? If you could
No.
have one private investor that said, I believe in you, make it worth my while, let's go build something, or even a group, 3 or 4 of what you would call all-in investors, let's go do the right thing always, this will be a worthy return for you. Your answer is no. I don't go the VC route.
I would spend 2 to 3 times the amount of time and energy required to get to a successful outcome and own the whole business. And so I wouldn't my philosophy moving forward on most things is I don't bring in outside capital. I fund it all. And some people go, well, I don't have the money to do that. Well, then bootstrap, get creative, be really frugal with how you spend money. It's going to take you longer to do that. But in my mind, the best way to build companies is to own the majority of it or the entire thing and not have the down pressure of investors and other people on the cap table.
What I hear you saying is that you're not discouraging people from having an equitable partner that's helping build the business as much as a equitable partner that has voting rights that is not in the day-to-day operations of the business that could have influence on the direction of the business.
For sure. Yep. And when you get into venture, it's changed a little bit, but at that time it was a grow at all costs model, meaning you were going to raise as much money as you could as fast as you could, and you were going to spend that money as fast as you could to sort of boost top line revenue. But nobody thought about profitability and EBITDA and building like really good sustainable companies. That creates a ton of pressure. That doesn't feel good when you're the CEO. And the more money you raise, the less of the company you own. So when I sold our company, I had less than 30% of the company, and it was 4 years. If I would have went 7 years, I might have had 10% by the time I was done. And so I would rather spend 15 years building a company, having the entire thing, not worrying about that down pressure from investors, being able to make decisions on my own without the pressure of a board. Hypothetically, it's harder and it takes longer, but it's better. That's the way to do it.
Why? Of quality of life, quality of business, more money directly to you? Like, what's your first two reasons for that?
The stress level and pressure is intense. So intense that it can be debilitating when you know you owe a lot of people a lot of money. That's, this, you raise money, you're a professional fundraiser. Like, if you're not really good at managing what's in here, it can physically make you sick for long periods of time. It can physically kick you into spouts of anxiety and depression where you don't want to see other people. You don't want to fly on airplanes. You don't want to get new, and I experienced that. And so that's the main reason. Yeah.
I love that. Tyler, you created this, you created your exit. What now? You are young. How old were you the day that you had your last responsibilities with Driveably?
31. Yeah.
31.
Yeah.
So you sold at 30. You created a 12-month commitment to stay on after, I'm assuming?
Well, no, that's where the story gets pretty crazy. So I planned on being there for at least 2 years.
Okay.
So I had a 2-year commitment to the company that acquired us. Public company, $4 billion business, 2,500 people, sort of mid-cap company. And 5 months after the acquisition, I received news that I'm in New York City. I'm at NASDAQ getting ready to present with the CEO of the parent company on CNBC. This is like every tech entrepreneur's dream is that moment, right? Or to ring the bell, taking your company public.
Yeah.
Wake up from a call from my mother-in-law who informs me that my wife, her daughter, is being rushed to the hospital in an ambulance, and she's not sure what's going on. I text my assistant. I say, I got to get home. I can't be at this thing. Can we get me a flight ASAP? I get in the Uber. I'm getting text message updates from my father-in-law, and they read, just got to the hospital. They checked her into triage, just an ultrasound, and found 2 liters of blood in her abdomen. And the next one was a photo of what the doctor had written the diagnosis down, which said ruptured ectopic pregnancy. So at this point, I'm at the airport. I go to Google. I Google this. I find out that in more than 50% of cases where this happens in the home, it's fatal. So I go from this is going to be okay. This is the way that life works. We get lightheaded. Sometimes we pass out. Sometimes we go to the hospital. But life tends to just work itself out, and feeling very optimistic to my wife's going to die. There's a high probability of that. And this was like, I'm on the plane, and the next 4 updates are they rushed her in for an emergency cesarean surgery, basically slice her wide open and sew her up and get as much blood out of there as they can. 1 hour later, still in surgery. 1 hour later, still in surgery. 1 hour later, still in surgery. At this point, I'm on the plane. I'm incredibly concerned. I'm starting to go into a state of shock on the plane. I'm kind of coming in and out of like crying, trying to keep it together, to like optimistic, to writing things down, to document the whole thing. I'm a mess. And then I get a message as the plane is descending. This is 7 hours after that initial call, that says something to the effect of, brace yourself. It doesn't look like she's going to make it. And this is from her dad. So when I read this text, I had this feeling come over me, which was, she's gone, she's passed, but he's not going to tell me until I get there. He's a hardcore dude. He's a police officer, homicide detective. And I land, I run through the airport. It's like you'd see in the movies. I get my Uber. Tell the Uber driver, please safely drive as fast as you can. I got to get to the hospital. This was during COVID times where only one person was allowed in the hospital still. This was 2 years and 3 months ago. And at 7 p.m., they didn't allow new guests. And I landed at like 5:50, and I was an hour from the hospital. So I had to get there. I get to the hospital. I run past the emergency room. I go up 2 floors. I get to her room. I open the door and I realize, sort of audibly, what I recognize is that the heart rate monitor is still on. And so in this moment, I just felt a ton of gratitude that I got one more moment with her. And my father-in-law is sitting by her bedside. And I sit down and I say, hey, how's she doing? And he says, before he can answer, she starts having this really intense seizure. And she's basically in a state of comatosis at this point. I run into the hallway. I'm asking nurses and doctors to come in. It's super scary. They come in, they get her calmed down. That night, I lay awake in my bed for 10 hours with my eyes peeled open. And I'll have this memory forever on my mind, which is exactly what the heart rate monitor looked like and exactly the beats that they did. I can still remember the sound it made, the cadence by which the heart rate monitor, and the whole night just waiting for it to flatline. I knew it was going to happen. They had told me like her chance of living is very low. And I just was like going through all these thoughts of what am I going to do when that happens, and how am I going to act, and can I keep myself together, and how am I going to tell my kids, and all these thoughts. Will I ever love again? Have I been a good father? Have I been a good husband? I went through a lot. Well, we get to the next day. She's still alive. We do a fast that second day. I text everybody I know to come along, members of our faith who know how to do this, people that aren't of our faith who don't know how to do this. And there must have been hundreds or maybe thousands of people that did this fast. I basically wrote out, here's how you do it. Here's when we're going to start it with a prayer, the whole deal. Well, she lives a second night against the odds. And then she lives a third night. And by the fourth day, miraculously, she starts sort of coming to and communicating more. And I remember sitting on her bed and talking to her. And I remember just saying, do you remember that outside of that seizure, she was completely still, didn't move an inch, any part of her body. So do you remember that seizure thing that you had? What happened there? And she said, when I heard your voice, it gave me life. And that was one of these, maybe the most meaningful moment of my life, right? Where I realized that this sacred obligation that I had to her as her husband was so sacred that it meant that just the sheer sound of my voice could help her fight and get through it, you know? And so the good end of this story is she eventually gets healthy, super healthy today. We lost that child in the process. That would have been our fourth. We ended up having another child. But going through an experience like that where, to frame this up, you had reached the pinnacle of success. 30 years old, the headlines, the press releases, the money, all the stuff, healthy kids, healthy wife, I'd reached the summit, right? And then to have that all ripped away through this experience where I realized that none of that stuff was actually that important. That was what I personally needed to get to a place to where now I feel like I'm focused on the right things, right? And so what are those things? I launched a podcast as a result of that 14 months ago. That podcast has become way bigger and more successful than I expected it to be. It's called the Roller Coaster Podcast, but we really focus on this insane roller coaster of people's lives. And I highlight people that have stories of deep trauma and deep rock bottoms and how they've been able to overcome these things. You know, I launched a men's mental health and personal development brand called Levels. I feel called by God to help change the lives of millions of men. I've been fortunate enough to go through some stuff and learn some things that I think I can add a lot of value back to men. And the community aspect of bringing great men together is really the key in all of this. It has very little to do with me. And, you know, I'm building companies that I'm passionate about helping other entrepreneurs like AZ Rocket Studios, for example, and helping you take your message and your story and your podcast and your content and bringing that to life for the world. So that's some of what I'm working on now.
Yeah. I get excited when I have people on that I believe are going to be repeat guests. You know, meaning that if we just went through the Drivably aspect of things, that'd be great. But I believe that there's more to the story. And what I like most about it is that alignment is the term that I'll use. I feel that everything you're working on right now aligns for what you want in your life.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a great place to be. And yeah, the feedback, I know a couple people personally that I knew before that attended your first ever Levels event, your retreat, I'll call it. I don't know what you would call it. I'll call it a retreat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Their experience was hard for them to put into words. And one of the people was seeking it. Hey, I want this in my life. And the other person, I would say, was invited by you that would not have sought it out.
Yeah.
And the feedback from both of them was amazing. And I look forward to attending personally and, you know, seeing what these retreats evolve into. And I think that the message and the intent behind it is going to have a big impact on, again, this theme of how you can reach, your stories and the stories of your guests, and are reaching millions of people now at this point. And it's great. I've had conversations when I don't know if I want to, create content that goes out into the world. And I really enjoy people that are creating content from a pure place, a serving place, not a, straight monetary value place, and whatever it may be. And so I look forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time that you've spent with us more than anything. Hosting us, spending as much time as you have. We've referenced AZ Rocket Studios for people that want to create content and have it out in the world, whether that's in podcast form or creating content. They can reach out to you. Where do they find AZ Rocket Studios?
Probably the best is just AZ Rocket Studios is the name of the Instagram, or Tyler Hall on my Instagram. Either one.
Okay.
I'll respond personally. So.
Yeah. Anyone that wants to find more of your story from an entrepreneurial standpoint, where do they get it?
Tyler Hall on Instagram. That's the big one.
Tyler Hall on Instagram.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. I love you, brother. Thank you for being with us, and look forward to seeing what's up next.
You too. Thanks, James.
Thanks.
Dad, are you sure you know what you're doing?